to Women in Data and tonight's session, Developing a Work-Life Balance Mindset. My name is Sadie St. Lawrence and I'm the founder of Women Data. I'm really excited to have everyone here and to host tonight's session. We have a great subject and a great presenter, and I know everybody's going to get a lot out of this session. So just a quick background on Women in Data and who we are. So Women in Data is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to increase diversity in data careers. So we do this through providing awareness, education, and advancement to women in the tech industry, but specifically to new and emerging fields like analytics, data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. We're really passionate about our mission, and one of the things that makes what we do so strong is really our community. So we have over 10,000 people in our communities. We have 26 chapters across the globe, and we have hosted over 100+ events. The format of our events has changed a little bit in the recent months with COVID-19, but we're so excited to connect with you online, and our community just grows stronger and stronger every day. One of the things I will just give a quick shout out, we do have like I said, we have a really strong community, and one of the great ways to connect with that is through our Slack channel. So there is information on our website for you to join that community. Feel free to go and check it out. But I do not want to steal away from tonight's session and what we're all here and excited to talk about, which is developing a work-life balance mindset. And tonight we are fortunate to have Mira Morton. She is a certified life coach school life coach, and she really works a lot with mindset, self-help, and spiritual growth. And here at Women in Data, we really want to help women become their best selves. And speaking from someone who has a life coach themselves, like, everybody needs a mirror in their life. And so we're really, really excited to have her with us tonight, and really fortunate. I would encourage you to go to her and like her on Facebook. She does a lot of live videos, and she also is at The Bossy Coach. / at facebook.com. So definitely go and check her out. And without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Mira.
All right. So thank you very much, Sadie, for the warm introduction and for bringing me in to talk to your folks. I am super excited to be here and to talk about work-life balance, and the work-life balance mindset in particular. So I am a full-time lobbyist in Sacramento, California. I am also a life coach. I have a small practice that I do on the side, but this is clearly where my passion is, and that's something that I'm really excited about. And when Sadie and I first talked about this, we talked about how big of an issue work-life balance is for women and how much it comes up amongst her community in Women in Data. So I was excited to bring my perspective to work-life balance, and I know that you're going to get a lot out of tonight's performance, and I hope to start a conversation with you all through my Facebook page, through Women in Data, to see if we can help kind of transform your experience of working in the tech industry and all of these different data fields to create more balance in your own life. And I think the topic is even more timely now than it is normally, because the pandemic has highlighted a couple things. First of all, it's disrupted all of our self-care, right? So if you used to go to the gym and you used to hang out with friends or take vacations and get your nails done and whatever it is that you do for self-care, you got massages, right? We all had practices that we had kind of built to take care of ourselves and manage ourselves. And most of that has been disrupted in a lot of communities around the world. Just really haven't been able to do that the same way that we could. Sometimes I even think just wandering around a store is restful, right? And you really don't do that anymore. We also have experienced a lot of new challenges. So a lot of people, if you have young children, then you've gotten the joy of becoming a full-time teacher in addition to all of the other responsibilities that you already had. Maybe you're sharing office space in a small house space or condo space with family members, and you're trying to figure out how to juggle all of that. And then I think like the third thing, and probably the most interesting to me, is that for a lot of women professionals that I've been talking to, it has kind of highlighted, like, yeah, there's a lot of things about the pandemic that are not awesome, right? And even the way that it's changed our lives. But for a lot of people, because they're working from home, because they're not commuting, because they have a lot more flexibility, we're starting to realize, like, oh, I actually like more space in my life. I like more quiet in my life. I like this change. And maybe when the pandemic is over, I don't want to go fully back to the new normal. And so I think that's really an invitation to start to think about what kind of a life do you want to create really intentionally for yourself as you come out of the pandemic. And now is the time to really start thinking about that. Why is it that you're living it the way that you're living it now? And what is it that it will take in order to create a new normal for you post-pandemic? And so I'm going to try to give you a roadmap to what that will look like. So the objective that I have for you today, there's obviously a million things we can talk about in work-life balance, and we may do that at a future event. But today, I really just want to fundamentally shift the way you think about work-life balance. The way we normally talk about it, we're going to kind of break that down. And then I'm going to tell you what I think the problems are with the way that it's normally addressed. And then we're going to talk about how you can start to create a more balanced experience in your life today or tomorrow, because it is evening in most places. All right. So what is work-life balance? I brought a couple definitions. They were long, so I didn't want to write them up on the poster board. But first of all, there's a lot of places that talk about work-life balance and they never tell you what they think it is, which is fascinating to me. Like there's this sense that we just commonly understand. And in a nutshell, you know, HR Zone, for example, said work-life balance refers to the level of prioritization between personal and professional activities in an individual's life. Cambridge Dictionary, the amount of time you spend doing your job compared with the amount of time you spend doing your family and other things you enjoy. Business Dictionary, a comfortable state of equilibrium achieved between an employee's primary priorities and their employment position and then their lifestyle, right? Now, the first thing I love about the definition is it's basically like there's work and then there's everything else, as though the everything else is just one bucket. That might be problem number one with how we think about work-life balance. Because of course, the older you get and the more you do things in your life, you find a partner, you find a home, you know, you just start to have more and more bubbles. Maybe you have aging parents that you're taking care of. You just start to have more and more spheres of your life that you're trying to balance, right? So the other thing that I noticed about these definitions is they tend to talk about not just the role of the worker, right, but the role of the employer and also sometimes the role of the family members. In particular, I think the partner, right, that if you're not married to someone or in a relationship with someone who equally wants to share house responsibilities, then it's harder for you to find balance, right? And that, so somehow like we're supposed to pick that person. If we don't pick the right partner, then work-life balance just can't happen for us. And the other, there's a lot of emphasis on the employer in a lot of these examples. So talking about whether they have telecommuting policies, whether they have flex leave so that it's not just sick leave, you can kind of use it however you want, whether, just a host, or if you have paternity and maternity leave and extended leave for family issues that come up. And if the employer doesn't do that, again, it kind of leaves the impression with you that you can't have balance. And one thing about the mindset approach that's really, really different is we want to really shift our attention away from the things that we don't have control over. Like you may have a partner that you're quite fond of who just doesn't really view his or her responsibility to do everything equally. Or maybe they do, but then they never do it the way that you want it done, right? And you're like, this is not how we load the dishwasher. So, but if that's where your happiness and your sense of balance comes from, then you're just kind of out of luck. And mindset really is about shifting your focus from those things that you can't control and really paying attention to the 90% of things that you can to change your experience. So problem with the approach, dependent upon others, I just said, it ignores the role of our thoughts. And we will spend a lot of time on this about how important our thoughts are to creating work-life balance. In fact, I think that's almost all of it, is that the way we tend to think about our lives is the thing that leaves us feeling like we're doing it wrong. And then finally, none of these things really talk to you about how it is you're supposed to know when you've achieved it. Like, what is the indicator that you have achieved balance? And so I think most of us kind of have this sense that it means we feel good. And so if we're not feeling good, we think we don't have balance. And so I think this is a real shortcoming. I think measuring and determining that you have work-life balance based on how you feel is not helpful. How you feel is really telling you how you're thinking about your life. It's not telling you whether your life is balanced. So why do we want work-life balance? So one of the other definitions I found that I actually liked was from worklifebalance.com, and they talked about balancing achievement and enjoyment. And I think that really is more of what we're trying to get at when we say we want work-life balance. We want to achieve, we want to get promoted and advance in our careers and do amazing things with our lives. We want to raise happy, successful children. We want to have a partner to share our lives with. We want all the things, right? But we don't want to do it at the expense of enjoyment, right? There's kind of this old model where you just grind and work until it's time to retire, and then you finally get to enjoy your life. So it's okay that you're suffering for 2/3 of your life because you're going to enjoy it later. And I think work-life balance is like, how can I enjoy it today while I'm doing it, like while I'm in the grind? And that's what we're seeking. And ultimately, we think that we'll feel better, right? We'll get some enjoyment once we figure out the right way to balance it and the right way to schedule our days. And what I think that really comes with, that feeling of better, is two thoughts. I'm doing it right, and I'm doing enough, right? Now, you may talk to yourself, you may say both things to yourself, that you're not doing enough, that you're doing it wrong. And I think these are the most two prevalent ways that it shows up, that we end up telling ourselves we have not figured out balance. We're not doing enough yet, right? So as we start to correct these thoughts, we'll start to feel better. But it's really not about changing all of the aspects of your life, marrying the right person. Like, none of that stuff actually needs to happen for you to have work-life balance. It's learning how to get to these thoughts where you're doing it right and you're doing enough, and creating that for yourself. So most of us try to achieve work-life balance by getting really efficient, right? Like, at first, when you're younger, you're adding things into your schedule and it's getting fuller and fuller and fuller, but for a while it's not too crazy. And then one day you're like, okay, like, this isn't gonna work. So you start reading all the books you can find about time management. I read all of them. That was me like 5 years ago. It was like Swallow That, Eat That Frog, I think was one of the books I read, and Essentialism, and all these great books. Trying to figure out how to squeeze more into my days and just get really efficient and focused when I was working on things, so that when I wasn't working on them, I could let them go. And then we get really busy, right? We stop having downtime. We stop sleeping. Like, people will give up all sorts of things to try to do it all. But ultimately, this is all about not actually cutting things out and just fitting more in to the hours that you have. Then we tend to measure our success by comparing ourselves to others who are doing it the best. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but this comparison is usually how we decide whether we're achieving balance or not, whether we're doing it right or not. And this, I think, is a real problem for us. And then finally, we blame others for why we don't have it. And this gets back to that part of the original definition, which is that it's dependent somehow. If work-life balance is dependent upon your employer's policies, and they're dependent upon your partner's willingness to contribute and your family's willingness to do their own laundry, right? Then you may feel like, well, then I'm never going to get balanced because they're not willing to do that. And that just really leaves you in this kind of victimized place. So this is what I think is fundamentally wrong with how we tend to think about it, or at least unhelpful, right? It's not helpful to just be like, well, I guess I'm stuck. So as we move forward from here, I really want you to keep this question in your mind. What if your life is balanced right now? Like, what if your life, as it looks, even if it's a hot mess, is the hot mess that you've created based on your priorities, based on the things that matter to you, right? What if the only reason that you think it's not balanced is that it hasn't created in you this magical feeling of enoughness, right? Now, I do think that there's a lot of things that and we're going to talk about how to be much more deliberate in the way that you craft your life, and in the way that you allocate your time, and in the way that you prioritize. I think there's a lot of work to be done there. But I also think that we can have achieved what we really, really want with great intention. But if we will not bless ourselves and tell ourselves this is enough, we're never going to get that feeling. And then we're going to think we haven't gotten there, that we haven't figured out the right formula yet. So always be thinking, what if my life is balanced right now? What is the evidence that I have that it isn't? Like, what do I think is broken? And asking yourself that question, I think, is really helpful and will give you a lot of information about things that you might want to change. Right? All right. So So the mindset approach to work-life balance is different. And I've started to kind of allude to what it is. So every aspect of work-life balance, right down to the fact that you think that you should want it, right, is a thought. It's a belief that you have that work-life balance is a good thing and that if I have it, my life will be better for it. But that's just a thought that you have. There are lots of people who actually don't think that. Generations of people who didn't think that, right? They worked until they retired and then they thought they would have fun. So not everybody thinks this way, but if you do think this way, just recognize that that's a belief system you have. And that means everything about it, you can choose how to think about it, which is kind of amazing. You may not be practiced at it, but it gives you a ton of power to change your whole life once you start to view it this way. So in the mindset approach, we focus on our thoughts and our choices and decisions, I think, are both critical here, rather than other people. This is not to say that there is not a time and place to talk to a boss or talk to a partner or talk to family members about maybe changing things up. But what we don't want is to get really focused on if this person won't change, then I can't be happy, right? We try to steer away from that because that puts you in a place of being victimized and feeling stuck. And then you stop seeing all of the opportunities that you have to make your life better, even though there's certain things you can't change about it. So there's a time and place for talking to other people and trying to move them. But if you become dependent upon them changing, that can create a lot of frustration and convince you that it's not possible to have balance. And I think ultimately work-life balance is about making deliberate trade-offs based on what you value and letting your intentions drive your actions, right? So instead of just letting life live you, instead of letting people constantly tell you what you should be doing and then being like, okay, well, I guess I'll do that, everything that you do becomes much more intentional and based on really sitting down with yourself and making thoughtful decisions about how you want to spend your life. And we're going to talk about how to do that. The other thing I want to leave you with here about mindset, and I think this may actually be like the most important sentence in my whole presentation, is that enough is just a decision that you get to make. When you stop measuring yourself and what enough is based on how that person down the street or that person next to you in the office or your mother or whoever is telling you what you should be doing, when you stop basing your worthiness on everybody else's opinion and you start basing it on your own opinion, enough is just something you get to decide. This is enough, and I'm going to give myself permission to let it go if it's beyond this level. Super powerful thing to just write down and keep around you. And when you start feeling like you're not doing enough, you're like, no, wait, enough is just a decision I get to make. Do I feel like this is enough? Why or why not? Where is that pressure coming from? All right. So knowing what matters to you for a lot of us is much easier than honoring what matters to us. Now, there are some people who, because we've so kind of absorbed all of the conditioning and the beliefs that were given to us by our family and our friends and our communities, that we actually have a lot of trouble separating out what we want versus what we think we should want. But in general, people are much better at figuring out, like, no, these are the things that matter to me. But then I never seem to actually spend my time on those things, right? And if you're one of those people, there's a reason why it's hard, right? First of all, it's hard because we believe there's a right way, right? And whenever you believe there's a right way, then there has to be a wrong way. And then you're constantly going to find yourself falling on the wrong side of that line because we're not perfect humans, right? So, and usually how we determine what the right way is, because the right way is subjective, is either comparing ourselves to other people or comparing ourselves to what we were told a good wife, mother, daughter, you know, all the things, worker, what we were told we were supposed to be doing. The other thing that we do is we end up feeling victimized by other people's priorities and expectations, right? Every time somebody tells us that we should be caring about something, we're like, oh, okay. And then we just switch from whatever it was that we said that was important to us and whatever it was we put on our calendar, and we just switch gears, right? That's not actually because they have any power over you. It's because you're in the habit of responding to every whim and every, you know, value that anybody else expresses to you. And so that can make it very hard if you're in this habit of reacting to other people. It makes it hard for you to honor what you know is important for you. And then third, sometimes we just get stuck in like, I'm not willing to give up any of the things. Like some people just really will cling to like, no, I have to do all of these things. And if you get really stubborn and stuck there, you'll keep denying that at the end of the day, work-life balance does require you to make decisions. It does require you to prioritize, and it does require you to stop doing certain things. And so if you refuse to accept that, you'll just keep looking for the magical formula that will allow you to fit everything in and never say no to anyone. But it doesn't work, which I think is why a lot of you are here watching today. I'm sure you've tried, right? You've read all the books and watched all the things. And ultimately, there's always more in life that we could be doing than we really have time for. All right, so some common thoughts that come up in my clients and in people that I talk to that I think really undermine our sense of work-life balance. First one, everybody's doing it better than me, right? There's not a group I go into where somebody doesn't think that. And in fact, most of the people in the group think it, which makes it kind of hilarious because we all think everyone else is doing it better than us, and really they're not, right? And they feel exactly the same way about us. I must be doing it wrong because I feel terrible. So again, if you thought that work-life balance was going to create happiness and you're not happy, then you might decide that you don't have work-life balance. And that's not necessarily true. I'm not doing enough. Super common mantra for women, especially in the United States. I don't have time for a personal life. I think some people just try to like toss spheres out of their lives. Like, I don't know how to figure out how to do all of that. So I'm just going to decide that it's not really that important and I'm not going to try to have it. And I'm not going to try to have a partner. I'm not going to try to have friends. Can't have pets. We just don't have time for that crap, right? I have so much that I have to do. This is another one I hear almost on a daily basis from people, even in the pandemic when I don't see that many people, right? There's so much I have to do. And I think that have to do is really the toxic part of the sentence because there's literally nothing that you have to do. Got news for you people. Nothing that you have to do. If I don't do it, it won't get done. This is another common one from women, right? Like, especially at home, but also in the workplace, right? You have coworkers and you're like, they're never going to pick up the slack. If I don't get this done, the project won't get done. We'll all get fired, right? And we start taking on all this obligation because we have this thought. And then also, and I've kind of alluded to this one, that a good wife, mom, worker, friend, daughter would do, right? And when we have this sense of like what we should be doing, we're never going to measure up. So ultimately, what work-life balance requires of you is honesty. It requires that you be really honest with yourself about what matters to you, and that you be honest with other people about what doesn't matter to you. And that's the hard one, right? Like, you absolutely are going to disappoint people when you stop doing everything, especially if you've been doing everything, right? People have gotten used to you doing all of their stuff. They've gotten used to relying on you. They've gotten used to the fact that you never say no. They've gotten used to the fact that, like, I can come to you at the very last minute with some crazy thing at midnight and you'll stay up and sacrifice your own sleep in order to make this happen. Like, when people are used to that, they will be disappointed. Furthermore, they have other beliefs about what you should be doing, right? They have bought into the conditioning, just like you have, about what a woman is supposed to be doing and what you're supposed to be doing in particular. Maybe they raised you to think that you should be doing certain things. And so you have to kind of let go of that, or let it happen, but not act on the fact that people are going to be upset about you not wanting to do everything that they think is important and that they think you should be doing. So doing what you think you should be doing will never feel good to you, because at the end of the day, it's a lie, right? When you are doing something in order to make someone else think that you're a good person, it's manipulation. I think we talk about people pleasing a lot, like it's a good quality, like we're good people and because we just want to make people happy. But ultimately, it's manipulation and it's a lie. You're telling them that you think one thing and that you want one thing when actually you think and want another thing. It's a lie, you guys. And it feels terrible. Like, a lie doesn't feel good in our bodies. And I think one of the things we so often think of that isn't work-life balance, like that feeling of I don't have it, is the fact that we're constantly living somebody else's priorities instead of our own. The other thing about it is it's really toxic to all of the relationships in your life to live according to everybody else's priorities. You would think doing everything that they want would make you like closer to your partner and closer to your boss and closer to your parents and closer to your kids. But what it actually does is create all of this distance, because you start to resent them, right? You feel guilty anytime you don't do the thing that they want. You start to avoid them because you know that if you see them, they're going to make you feel guilty because they're going to have expectations for you that you don't really want to comply with. You start to feel resistant. And if you keep pushing yourself to do it and do it and do it, you will eventually burn out. And I think burnout can also be physical illness and disease. Like when we constantly are living according to someone else's priorities, the consequences can be quite dramatic for our bodies and for our minds. So while it's true that living according to your priorities is not always easy, it feels like the truth. And I have to tell you that even the discomfort of letting people down, but in a way that is true to you, feels so much better than the discomfort of living a life that's a lie for you. Right? This feels like balance, even though it's hard and human, right? This feels terrible. And it causes you to start to resent all the people in your life that you love and you're supposed to be doing it for. All right, so we're going to finish up with a quick formula for how to create work-life balance for yourself. This is kind of an exercise. You don't have to write it all down. I've given this to Sadie and she's going to send it out to you after the presentation. However, if you're watching the recording after the fact, you can email me. I'm going to leave my email address up after this, and you can always email me and get this list from me if you're interested. So identifying your priorities is number one. So you want to get out a piece of paper or a word processor or whatever, and you want to type down all the things that matter to you, everything that you want to include in your life, everything that you think deserves some time. Then step two, super important, go through and ask yourself for each thing, do I actually want to do this? Do I actually think that this is important in my gut? Or do I just think that I should think that it's important? Ask yourself that question for everything on your list. And then watch for what you feel, right? Because you'll get a no for some things. You'll get a like, oh, I don't want to let it go, but I don't really like it. And that's when you're doing something out of obligation, you have a sense that you should do it. Other people have told you it's what you should be doing, or you've taken that understanding. Anything that comes out as a should instead of a you genuinely think it's important, delete it. Cross it off your list, people. It's gonna make you crazy and it's gonna make your skin crawl and it's gonna feel really uncomfortable, but you gotta stop doing things that you don't actually want to do. This is the first way to create balance. The most important way to create balance in your life is to start doing things that are actually important to you, and then managing your mind around the fact that it doesn't always feel good to defy other people's expectations, rather than managing your mind around the fact that you actually want to be living a different life, right? Which is what most of us are doing. We're like, no, it's okay that you're living someone else's life. Just keep going. We want to flip that, and we want to start managing our mind around the fact that it feels uncomfortable to disappoint people, but actually start living a life that's true to us. All right, then decide how much time everything will get. I will tell you that I have a lot of clients who will try to just put, I don't know, 2 weeks worth of things in 1 week. And they're like, I'm gonna work out 13 hours this week. And then I also have all these doctor's appointments. And then I also am gonna work on my screenplay. And I'm also gonna go, at some point you're just not being realistic. Like, I really think it's helpful to take out a blank calendar and actually start to block out like how many hours you want to give things and see if it's physically possible. Because often we will not look at it in that gestalt way where we're looking at the whole picture, and we'll think that it's feasible, and then we'll constantly be telling ourselves we're doing it wrong because we never make it happen. But in reality, it was like, what do you mean you don't have 30-hour days, right? So I think this is a very important step. Fourth, decide how you will measure success. So we want to stop measuring success based on what other people around us are doing that we're watching, and we want to stop measuring success based on what people told us that we were supposed to be doing. We want to start measuring success based on what matters to us. So you get to sit down for every area of your life, and I encourage you to go beyond work life. Okay, I think you need to break life up into its pieces, and work may have pieces for you. So for me, I have coaching, and I also have my other career as a lobbyist. And so those are different things. They require different things of me. They each get their own time, and they have their own standard for, am I doing enough in them? So you decide what enough means for every sphere of your life. And then number 5, the most important and maybe the hardest, is have your own back about all the decisions that you made. So work-life balance is a series of decisions and then defending your own decisions to yourself, right? And what that means is when people come to you and say, oh, you mean you did that, right? And you can just feel judgment that you're doing it wrong. You're like, yeah. And even if you feel terrible, when you go talk to yourself about it, you're like, no, I sat down and I really asked myself what mattered to me, and I decided that didn't matter to me. So even though that person thinks it should matter and I feel slimed by them, I remember that I decided this really intentionally and I'm not going to beat myself up about it. That's what having your own back means. It means you defend your decisions and you don't change your mind just because somebody comes in and is disappointed with you or makes you feel guilty or ashamed, right? You're like, oh, no. I made this decision on purpose and I'm just going to manage my mind every time it tells me I'm doing it wrong. Okay? Because all of the rest, everything that comes up is just drama. And this really is, I think, where coaching comes into play. I spend a lot of time with my clients helping them figure out how to implement. Like, we can figure out what you want, but then it becomes hard to actually implement it in their lives. And coaching, I think, can be a really valuable way to learn how to do that and really see, like, oh, no, I'm just making myself feel obligated when I don't need to be. We kind of give you line of sight into your own mind. All right, so I know we're going to have some time for Q&A, and hopefully there's some questions out there. And again, if you're watching this as a recording, feel free to email me questions, or you can come see me on Facebook and type questions in there. And also I've got my email address here and my Facebook handle. It's not a group, so you don't have to like apply to get in. I just have a separate page for it. And I do lives every Saturday, blog posts every Monday. And if you ever have things that you're like, talk about this, I would love to, get your ideas. So, Sadie?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mira. I wish we could all like give a round of applause. This is fantastic. I mean, so many of those points really just hit home for me. I was like all excited to define my values. It was all about it. But then like coming to point 5 of like, okay, trust and own your decision. Like I need support to get through that. So if everybody wants to, we do have some extra time for questions. So you can either put questions in the chat or you can turn on your mic. While you're thinking of questions, I have a few questions for you, Mira, just to get started. So you talked a lot about, controlling your thoughts and, taking kind of control internally yourself. But what if like my boss is actually terrible? How do I fix my thoughts? Like, sometimes I just want to blame other people. What do I do in situations like that?
No, I know. Some people objectively are like, no, really, I have the worst boss ever, right? And so it's not that we deny reality, right? Like there can be a reality of your life. The issue with, and I think the difference with the mindset approach, the coaching approach, is not getting stuck there, right? That just because you have a boss that refuses to let you telecommute, I definitely talk to people who have bosses that are kind of tyrants and they yell at people or they have unrealistic expectations of them. You may have all sorts of circumstances that are trying for you. But when you get completely stuck that like, I can't feel good unless this person changes, then we're not going to get anywhere productive, right? And meanwhile, there's like a whole world of things you could be doing that might make your whole work experience more positive, even though your boss is all the things that your boss is. The other thing, and I end up talking a lot with this with my clients, is people will be like, well, I'm stuck. Like I work here, my boss is terrible. What do I do? Right? And they don't even see that they have a million options. And so sometimes I will take folks through that. Like, well, you never have to be anywhere, right? Like you never, ever, ever have to do anything. But the reason that you feel like you have to is actually because you don't like the consequence of choosing not to be where you are, right? But getting there is super helpful because all of a sudden it puts you back in the position of like, oh, I'm choosing to work for this tyrant right now because I like having a salary. It's the middle of a pandemic and it doesn't feel like a good time to be quitting my job. And maybe I'll look for one, but in the meantime, here I am, right? So all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I'm choosing this. I'm choosing to work for this person who I don't think is nice and isn't supportive of me, but I have good reasons, right? And then as soon as you get there, it just feels better. than it did before. But as long as you're telling yourself, I have to, this person's terrible and I'm completely at their mercy, you stay in victim mode and you can't even see all the opportunities you have to change your life for the better.
Fantastic. So we have another question in the chat. This is, I'm right in there with this question. It is there a process / tool to use to measure what my limit is? I never know what my limit is, and I always feel like I can take on one extra thing, smiley face. I feel like that's so me too. So.
Yeah. No, and I do think that there's a lot about this that's kind of trial and error, right? Like we have to play a little bit with ourselves and be willing to risk getting it wrong. But I think what happens, and my experience is that we have awareness after the fact in the beginning. So for a long time, you're making plans for yourself and you have a bunch of thoughts about like, I could do this, I can handle one more thing, right? And that set of thoughts causes you to add more things to your calendar. And then afterwards, you're like, dude, that was too much, right? And you suddenly feel overwhelmed. So at those moments when you realize, oh, I did it again, I overbooked myself. Like my husband totally does this. He overbooks us like crazy. And I'm like, we cannot do all the things, right? But in the moment when you realize that you've overbooked yourself again, like, oh, it happened again. It's sitting down in those moments and going back and being like, okay, what was I thinking and why did I add that extra thing, right? Because there's always something that's driving you and motivating you to add more stuff in. And sometimes it's scarcity, right? It's that like, I'm supposed to be doing more. Well, it would be better. Sometimes it's perfectionism. Like it would be even better if I did all of this. And sometimes it's even just like the optimistic thought of like, oh, I can do that. And then you're like, oh, when I think that thought in the future, I'm going to remember that that's often the thought I think right before I overbook myself. But I think taking advantage of the awareness afterwards and going back and analyzing it will cause you to start to become more aware, like at the moment when you're making the decision to add something else to your life.
Perfect. So I'll ask kind of two questions in one. One, how does someone know if they need a coach? And then two, if I want to work with you, how do I do that?
Well, obviously, I think everyone needs a coach, right? I'm completely obsessed with coaching, and then all of the coaches that I spend time with were like, oh, could we have 12 coaches? Like, we want all of them. But, you know, coaching is something that is not for everybody, right? And it's not for every phase of your life. But what I think really is an indicator that you would benefit from coaching is when you have a lot of predominantly negative emotions during your kind of driving your day. So we talked earlier about like obligation and guilt and resentment. I think that's one camp of emotions. Sometimes we have overwhelm and busyness and anxiety is another common camp of emotions. And so when you have a lot of that feeling that's really predominant in your day, that's a sign that you have a mind that's really unmanaged, right? And if you're like, what does that even mean? That's where coaching is super helpful, because all of those feelings are driven by thoughts that you're thinking that you're not even aware that you're thinking. You're making all of your choices from a place that doesn't feel like you have a choice. You're making all of your choices thinking, like sometimes we're hustling for worthiness, right? It's a Brene Brown expression that if we just work harder and we never stop and we never rest and we keep going and we look really stressed, then people will think that we're trying hard and they'll see that we're doing enough. And so we create a lot of negative emotion for ourselves. So I think for those people in particular, it's really hard to up level and move to the next level in your career and in your life if you don't learn basic mind management. And that's where I think a coach is just incredibly helpful. Talked to a lot of people. I've never done therapy, but I've talked to a lot of people who've done both. And they're like, therapy is super helpful when you have like deep wounds to heal and process. But therapy tends to be backwards looking and coaching tends to be forward looking. And so if you're like, look, I've gotten pretty far, but now I feel a little bit stuck and I just feel crappy, but I don't want to give up all my dreams. Well, coaching will totally unlock all of that for you and show you how to move to the next level. And if you do want to work with me, or even if you just want to find out more about coaching, so I may not be the right coach for everyone, but I have a ton of resources and I have a network of coaches I can connect you to. You can always reach out to me at my email or through my Facebook page. There's actually a book now button if you want to do a consult on my Facebook page. And that's actually basically like a free session, and I give you an hour and a half's worth of my time and help you sort out a lot in an hour and a half. So
Awesome. Well, I know I learned a lot from this session. We got some things coming in the chat. This was very helpful. So thank you so much. We look forward to connecting with you more and having you back again. And stay connected with all of us. Thank you so much for showing up tonight. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your evening.
No, thank you very much, Katie. It was great to be here. And have a good night, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are.
Yep. Bye, everybody.